What would you do if your own son told you to stay quiet in your own home? Nothing prepares you for the day your son snaps at you during a family meeting, especially when it's about selling your apartment. And then, just 10 minutes later, your daughter-in-law's desperate scream echoes through the house, begging you not to do something unthinkable. Trust me, you won't believe what happened next. It's a Sunday afternoon, the kind where the sun is shining just enough to make you feel guilty for staying indoors, but the promise of a family meeting has everyone gathered in my living room. The air is thick with the smell of coffee, my special hazelnut blend, which I brewed in hopes it would sweeten the mood. But let's be honest, the only thing thicker than the coffee is the tension. My son, Mark, is pacing back and forth like he's auditioning for a role in a daytime soap opera. He's got that furrowed brow and dramatic sigh down to an art form. My daughter-in-law, Lisa, is perched on the edge of the couch, clutching her phone like it's a lifeline, her eyes darting between Mark and me as if she's waiting for someone to throw the first punch. Verbally, of course. And me? I'm just trying to talk about selling my apartment and moving somewhere with less drama. Maybe a nice little condo by the lake, or a cozy cottage with a garden. Is that too much to ask? I clear my throat, trying to sound calm and collected, even though my heart is doing a little tap dance in my chest. So I've been thinking, I begin, it might be time for me to downsize. The apartment is just too much for me to handle on my own these days, and before I can even finish my sentence, Mark slams his hand on the table so hard that my favorite mug rattles. "Stay quiet when the adults are talking," he snaps, his voice sharp enough to slice through the tension like a hot knife through butter. "Excuse me? Did I just get demoted in my own house?" For a split second, I'm so stunned I can't even speak. I look at Mark, my own son, the boy I raised, the man who used to run to me with scraped knees and wild stories about monsters under the bed. Now he's looking at me like I'm the child and he's the one in charge. I glance at Lisa, hoping for a little backup, but she's suddenly very interested in her phone screen, her knuckles white as she grips it tighter. "Ladies, have you ever wanted to throw a pillow at someone but remembered you're supposed to be the mature one?" That was me right then and there. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, and for a moment, I had to remind myself to breathe. I mean, really, when did the world turn upside down? When did our children start thinking they could talk to us like that? I remember when Mark was little, he'd beg me to let him stay up late. And I'd say, "When you're the adult, you can make the rules." Well, apparently, he thinks that day has come. I take a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mark, I am the adult here. This is my apartment, and I have every right to—" He cuts me off again, waving his hand dismissively. "Mom, you don't understand. Selling the apartment is a big decision. We need to think about what's best for the family." "Oh, so now it's about what's best for the family." Funny how the family always seems to mean Mark and Lisa. I bite my tongue, resisting the urge to point out that I am, in fact, part of this family too. Instead, I look around the room, taking in the familiar sights, the old family photos on the wall, the worn armchair where I used to read bedtime stories, the little knickknacks I've collected over the years. This is my home, my sanctuary, and yet, in this moment, I feel like a stranger in my own living room. Lisa finally looks up from her phone, her eyes wide and pleading. "Maybe we should just take a step back and think about this, Mom," she says, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "It's a lot to process." I nod, trying to keep the peace, but inside I'm fuming. Why is it that every time I try to make a decision for myself, it turns into a group project? I'm not asking for their permission, I'm telling them what I want. But somehow, that message keeps getting lost in translation. Mark starts pacing again, muttering under his breath about responsibility and family legacy. I want to ask him when he became so concerned about legacies. Last I checked, he couldn't even keep a houseplant alive. But I hold my tongue because that's what we do, isn't it? We keep the peace. We swallow our pride. We let our children believe they know best, even when they're acting like toddlers in grown-up bodies. But as I sit there, watching my son and daughter-in-law argue over my future, something inside me shifts. Maybe it's the years of putting everyone else first. Maybe it's the realization that if I don't stand up for myself now, I never will. Or maybe it's just the caffeine finally kicking in. Whatever it is, I know one thing for sure. I'm done being quiet. I look at Mark, really look at him, and I see not just my son, but a man who's forgotten that his mother is still a person with dreams and desires of her own. I see Lisa, torn between loyalty to her husband and the woman who welcomed her into the family. And I see myself sitting at the crossroads of past and future, holding the keys to my own happiness. So, I do the only thing I can think of. I stand up, smooth my skirt, and say, "If you'll excuse me, I need some fresh air." And with that, I walk out to the garden, leaving the drama behind, at least for now. But as I step outside, I know this is just the beginning. Because sometimes, the only way to be heard is to stop talking and start acting. And trust me, I'm just getting started. I've always believed there's a certain dignity in knowing when to walk away. Not storming out, not slamming doors, well, maybe just a little slam for emphasis, but simply removing yourself from a situation before you say something you'll regret. So after Mark's outburst, I gathered what was left of my composure, stood up, and made my way to the garden. The air outside was crisp, tinged with the scent of freshly cut grass and the faint perfume of my late-blooming roses. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the cool breeze wash over me, and tried to steady my breathing. My hands were trembling, not from anger, but from a strange cocktail of hurt, disbelief, and, if I'm honest, a little bit of excitement. After all, I was about to do something I hadn't done in years. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old cell phone, the one I kept for emergencies. I scrolled through the contacts, my thumb hovering over a name I hadn't dialed in ages. Carol. Carol and I go way back to PTA meetings, bake sales, and the days when our biggest worry was whether our kids would eat their vegetables. These days, Carol is a real estate agent, and a good one at that. We'd lost touch over the years, as life has a way of pulling people in different directions, but I always knew if I needed her, she'd be there. And today, I needed her. My heart pounded as I pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I almost hung up, suddenly unsure if I was ready for this. But then, Carol's familiar voice answered, warm and cheerful as ever. "Hello, this is Carol." "Carol, it's me, Judy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know it's been a while, but I need your help." There was a brief pause, and then Carol's voice softened. "Judy, oh my goodness, it's so good to hear from you. Of course I'll help. What's going on?" I took a deep breath and explained the situation. How I was thinking of selling my apartment, how the family meeting had turned into a circus, and how I just needed someone in my corner. Carol listened quietly, occasionally making those little sympathetic noises that only old friends can make. When I finished, she didn't hesitate. "Judy, you deserve to make your own decisions. I'll come by tomorrow, and we'll talk through your options. No pressure, just information. And if you decide to move forward, I'll handle everything. You just focus on what's best for you." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had some control over my own life. I thanked Carol, promised to have coffee ready for her visit, and hung up. I stood there in the garden for a moment, letting the reality of what I'd just done sink in. I was taking a step, maybe a small one, but a step nonetheless, toward reclaiming my independence. Just then, I heard voices drifting through the open window. Mark and Lisa were still arguing, their words muffled, but their frustration clear. I could picture Mark, running his hands through his hair, and Lisa, pacing back and forth, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. I almost felt sorry for them, almost. But then I remembered the way Mark had spoken to me, the way Lisa had looked away instead of standing up for me, and my resolve hardened. 10 minutes later, as I was deadheading a few roses, gardening is the best therapy, isn't it? I heard Mark's phone ring inside. The sound was sharp, slicing through the tension like a knife. The house went silent. You could have heard a pin drop, or in my case, the neighbor's dog barking at a squirrel. I paused, pruning shears in hand, and waited. And then it happened. Lisa's voice exploded through the phone, desperate and shrill, echoing out the open window for the whole world to hear. "Mother-in-law, we're family. You can't do this to us." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not a mean-spirited laugh, but the kind that bubbles up when you realize you finally turned the tables. For years, I'd been the one bending over backward, making sacrifices, putting everyone else's needs before my own. But now suddenly I was the one holding the cards. It felt exhilarating. I imagined the scene inside. Mark staring at his phone in disbelief, Lisa wringing her hands, both of them realizing that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as helpless as they thought. I wondered if they were picturing me out here, plotting their downfall like some kind of villain. The truth was much simpler. I just wanted a little respect. A little say in my own life. Was that so much to ask? As I stood there, surrounded by the flowers I'd planted with my own 2 hands, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was excited. Nervous, yes, but excited. I knew there would be more arguments, more guilt trips, more desperate phone calls. But I also knew I was ready for them. I was done being quiet. I was done letting other people make decisions for me. I took one last look at the garden, the sun casting long shadows across the lawn, and smiled. Whatever happened next, I knew I could handle it. After all, I'd survived worse. And besides, I had Carol and a newfound sense of confidence on my side. As I walked back toward the house, I could hear Mark and Lisa's voices rising again, panic creeping in. But this time, I didn't feel small or powerless. I felt strong. I felt ready. And I couldn't wait to see what happened next. Now I know what you're thinking. What exactly did I do out there in the garden? Did I call a lawyer? The police? Maybe the local psychic who's always handing out business cards at the grocery store? No, nothing quite so dramatic. I called my old friend Carol, the one with the real estate magic touch and a Rolodex that could make your head spin. Carol and I go way back, and if there's one thing I know about her, it's that she gets things done. She's the kind of woman who can sell a house before the for sale sign is even in the ground. And more importantly, she's always been in my corner, even when I didn't know I needed her. After our call, I felt a sense of calm settle over me, like I'd finally taken the first step towards something I should have done years ago. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the garden, letting the sun warm my face and the birdsong drown out the muffled arguments coming from inside. I could almost hear Mark and Lisa's frantic whispers, their voices rising and falling as they tried to piece together what was happening. I imagined them pacing, checking their phones, maybe even peeking out the window to see if I was still out there, plotting their doom. The truth was much simpler. I was just tired of being treated like a piece of furniture, something to be moved around, used and taken for granted. When I finally came back inside, the atmosphere had shifted. Mark was sitting on the edge of the couch, his leg bouncing nervously, while Lisa hovered nearby, her phone glued to her ear. They both looked up as I entered, their faces a mixture of confusion, worry, and, if I'm being honest, a little bit of fear. It was almost comical. Have you ever seen grown adults suddenly remember their manners? It's like magic. Or maybe just a little bit of fear. Either way, I wasn't about to let them off the hook that easily. I sat down across from them, folding my hands in my lap. I've made a decision, I said, my voice steady. I'm going to meet with Carol tomorrow to discuss selling the apartment. I want to see what my options are. Mark's mouth opened and closed, like a fish out of water. Lisa's eyes widened, and she let out a little gasp. For a moment, no one said anything. The silence stretched between us, heavy and awkward. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Finally, Mark found his voice. Mom, you can't be serious. This apartment it's important to the family. We need to think about the future. I raised an eyebrow. Whose future exactly? Because it seems to me that every time we talk about this, it's about what you and Lisa want, not what I want. Lisa stepped forward, her voice trembling. We just thought, if anything ever happened, we'd have a place to go. You know, a safety net. Ah, there it was. The truth finally out in the open. Mark and Lisa had been counting on my apartment as their plan B if things went south for them. Maybe it was financial trouble, maybe just the uncertainty of life, but they'd been treating my home as their backup plan. And all this time, I'd been expected to just go along with it, to keep everything exactly as it was, just in case they needed it. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. I understand wanting a safety net, I said gently. But I can't put my own life on hold just so you have a backup plan. I've spent years making sure everyone else was taken care of. Now it's my turn. Mark looked down at his hands, his bravado slipping away. Lisa's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I saw the young woman I'd welcomed into the family, nervous and eager to please. I reached out and took her hand. "This isn't about shutting you out. It's about making sure I have the life I want too." The look on their faces when they realized I wasn't bluffing? Priceless. It was as if a switch had flipped. Suddenly, they were both apologizing, promising to be more supportive, asking what they could do to help. It was almost funny, watching them scramble to make up for years of taking me for granted. I couldn't help but smile, just a little. We spent the next hour actually talking, really talking, for the first time in ages. I told them about my dreams of a smaller place, maybe with a little garden, somewhere I could finally relax without worrying about leaky faucets or noisy neighbors. I shared stories about Carol, about our adventures back in the day, and how she'd always encouraged me to put myself first. Mark and Lisa listened, really listened, and I could see the wheels turning in their heads. Maybe they were finally starting to understand. Of course, there were still moments of resistance. Mark tried to argue that the apartment was part of the family legacy, that it should stay in the family for future generations. Lisa worried about what people would think, about how it would look if I moved out. But I stood my ground, calmly and firmly, reminding them that my happiness mattered too. By the end of the evening, something had shifted. The fear and desperation in their eyes had been replaced by a grudging respect. Maybe they didn't like my decision, but they finally accepted that it was mine to make. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen. As I got ready for bed that night, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I looked tired, yes, but also lighter, freer. I realized that standing up for myself wasn't just about selling an apartment. It was about reclaiming my voice, my choices, my life. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that whatever happened next, I was ready for it. Because sometimes, the biggest secret isn't what you do, it's finally believing you deserve to do it. After the dust finally settled, the house felt different. The tension that had hung in the air like a heavy curtain was gone, replaced by a quiet that was almost peaceful. No more raised voices, no more slamming doors, just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirping of birds outside. It was as if the whole house had exhaled, relieved that the storm had passed. Mark and Lisa sat across from me at the kitchen table, their faces a little red, their eyes a little puffy. But for the first time in a long time, they looked at me. Not through me, not past me, but at me. And I realized in that moment that this was what I'd been craving all along, to be seen, to be heard, to be respected. We actually had a real conversation. Not the kind where everyone talks over each other, or where someone storms out before the real issues are even addressed. No, this was different. This was honest. I told them how much I loved them, how grateful I was for the family we'd built together, but also how tired I was of feeling like my life was on hold for everyone else's sake. I explained that I wasn't trying to hurt them or abandon them, but that I needed to make choices for myself too. I needed to feel like I mattered, like my dreams and desires were just as important as theirs. I told them about the nights I'd lain awake, worrying about what would happen if I kept putting myself last, about the fear of growing old and invisible in my own home. To my surprise, they listened. Really listened. Maybe it was the shock of seeing me stand my ground. Or maybe it was the realization that Mom isn't just a backup plan, a safety net to be tucked away until needed. Maybe for the first time, they saw me as a person with her own hopes and fears, not just the woman who made their favorite meals and kept the family traditions alive. Whatever it was, something shifted. Mark reached across the table and squeezed my hand, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said quietly. "I never realized how much we were asking of you. I guess I always thought you'd be there, no matter what." Lisa nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "We took you for granted. I'm sorry too. I want you to be happy. You deserve that." Hearing those words, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For so long, I'd been afraid that saying no would mean losing their love, their approval. But here we were, closer than we'd been in years, all because I finally found the courage to speak up. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was terrifying. There's something about standing up for yourself, especially with family, that makes your heart race and your palms sweat. But sometimes, the scariest things are the most necessary. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about the future, not just mine, but all of ours. I told them about my dream of a little house with a garden, a place where I could plant tomatoes and roses, and maybe even try my hand at growing lavender. Mark offered to help me look for places, and Lisa promised to visit every weekend, bringing the grandkids for picnics and playdates. We laughed about the chaos of the past few days, and I even teased Mark about his soap opera performance in the living room. He blushed, but he took it in stride, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the boy I'd raised, the one with the big heart and the even bigger dreams. That night, as I sat in my favorite chair by the window, watching the sun set over the garden, I thought about all the women I know, friends, neighbors, even strangers I've met in line at the grocery store, who have spent their lives putting everyone else first. How many of us have stayed quiet when we wanted to speak up? How many times have we said yes when our hearts were screaming no? It's so easy to lose yourself in the needs and wants of others, to forget that you have a voice, a right to your own happiness. So ladies, here's my question for you. When was the last time you stood up for yourself, even when it was scary? When was the last time you said no and meant it, not out of anger or spite, but out of love for yourself? Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk out to the garden, take a deep breath, and make that call, to a friend, to a professional, or even just to yourself. It's not about being selfish. It's about being whole. I know now that saying no isn't the end of the world. In fact, it can be the beginning of something beautiful. It can open doors you never knew existed, bring you closer to the people you love, and remind you that your life is yours to live. It's not always easy, and it's rarely comfortable, but it's worth it, every single time. As I watched the last rays of sunlight fade, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. I was proud of myself, not just for making a decision, but for having the courage to see it through. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I also knew I was strong enough to face them. After all, I'd already done the hardest part. I'd found my voice. So, if you're reading this and wondering if you should take that first step, let me be the one to tell you, yes, you can. You deserve it, and who knows? You might just inspire someone else to do the same. If this story touched your heart, or if you've ever had to remind your family that you're more than just a backup plan, I'd love for you to subscribe and join our community. Let's keep sharing our stories, supporting each other, and celebrating the power of saying no, together.